I am Samantha. I'm the co-founder of Talent and Truth. And as always, I am joined by my business partner, Sabine Kuhn. And thank you all again. Hopefully you joined us last week. And if this is your first time, this is a series of lives that we're going to be doing just to address a few of the main questions and kind of problems that we're seeing with some of the clients that we're speaking to as it relates to executive branding. Before we jump in, just a quick reminder that if you are joining today's conversation, we are also hosting an upcoming webinar, which is all about how to build a business off the back of your thinking. So if you are looking to go into consulting or into fractional work at any point, this might be interesting for you. So we'll drop the link in the chat below. Follow that, and if it's of interest, then would obviously love to hear from you. So moving on to today's topic, one of the questions we get asked a lot about is positioning. We have a lot of clients who come to us. They've been maybe posting on LinkedIn for a long time, but they're not actually seeing the results of that effort. They're not actually attracting the types of opportunities that they want to. And so today we are going to talk through 5 of the biggest mistakes that we see people making on the platform, things that we've also done ourselves as individuals and as a company. And hopefully today you guys will be able to walk away with a few practical pieces of advice for things that you can do to make sure that your personal brands are also landing the way they need to. So as always, this is also a conversation. So any questions, drop them in the chat below and we're going to address those as they come up. So just to kick off, I'm going to ask Sabina just to give us a little definition of what it means to have a strong position and what positioning basically means.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. I'm really excited about today's conversation because I think this is probably the most underrated part about personal branding, about figuring out how to monetize your expertise and I guess position your expertise. So let me just very, very quickly give the most simplest explanation for positioning. And I recognize that for anyone who's not in marketing or who is not in PR or any type of communications role, that the concept of positioning could sound a little bit like mumbo jumbo. But positioning in its simplest form is essentially the process of deciding what you want to be known for and ensuring that the market receives it that way as well. So let's say you want to be known as X, it's making sure that that the market also receives it as X. And so the problem, or rather the mistake that we see a lot of people making, is that they do not know who they want to be or how they want to be perceived by the market. And so as a result, the market receives mixed signals. And when you receive mixed signals, things feel a little bit fluffy, they feel a little bit fuzzy, they feel a little bit clouded. And so as a result, people do not take action. So positioning, just once again, is the act of really deciding who do I want to be, what is the value that I want the market to receive and to understand about me, and then making sure that the market also receives it that way, so that there is alignment and harmony between those two worlds.
Brilliant. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's remembering that it's a choice and that you actually get to determine for yourself what you want your positioning to be and then take active steps to making sure that that comes to fruition. So thank you for that detailed explanation. Let's talk about the number one mistake that we see. And I'm going to turn back to you again so you can share with us what you think that is.
Awesome. So this is probably the mistake that I am most passionate about and the one that I see pretty much all the time, is that and I'm going to use the context of an executive. So let's say you've got 20 years of experience, you're looking to go independent, or you're looking to, earn some income on the side and start some consulting work, is that you end up being or positioning yourself as a jack of all trades. And so what happens is that people end up looking like generalists. Now, let me explain. When you have 20, 30 years of experience under your belt, it is very likely that you can do a lot of things. And also it's more likely that you can do a lot of things really well. So that means you could do strategy, you could do transformation, you could do leadership consulting. Maybe you can do finance as well. And so what ends up happening is that you end up positioning yourself as many things, and based on who you're speaking to, you're essentially putting on a different hat the whole time. And now that is probably, again, the top mistake that I see people making. And this is more so, I would say, amplified when people go independent, is because they're trying to make up income that they no longer have through a full-time role. And so I understand there's a little bit of an anxiety that starts setting in. But ultimately what happens then is that you dilute the market, and the market doesn't know who you are, what you do, and the impact of the work that you create. And so that's the first mistake. And I'm going to give a little bit of a few examples just to put some context to this. When we first started Talent and Truth about 7 years ago, my background and Samantha's background is in marketing, PR, and social media. And so when we first started, we offered everything and anything under the sun. So if somebody was willing to pay us money for it, we were going to do it. Whether it was social media copy, whether it was PR, whether it was podcasting, whether it was video editing, whether it was birthday invites, whatever it is. And so what happens is that when you start opening yourself up to a lot of work that you could do, it means that your profit margins fluctuate, because some work obviously yields a better profit margin than other work. It also means that you kind of don't really know who you're talking to, because your target audience is a bunch of different people based on what they need from you. The other thing that happens is that from a continuity perspective, it's really hard for you to focus on, right, this is actually the type of work that I want to go after, is because you've not deliberately chosen the lane that you want to own. And so when we started the business, and we made this mistake probably for the first, I want to say 5 years, because we were just busy. We were busy with a lot of different things. Our profit margins were up and down, but we never strategically chose the lane that we wanted to own. And only once we decided to start trimming the fat and start, saying no to things, did we realize, right, okay, this is actually what we want to be doing. This is actually going to make, yield a great profit margin for us. There is potential in here. And most importantly, this is the work that excites us. This is the work that doesn't drain us. A very simple exercise that I like to do now with clients when I take them through a little positioning exercise is looking at the 4 Ps, which is essentially purpose, profit, potential, and psyche. So purpose, very simply, is the work that you're doing aligned with your purpose or aligned with your natural strengths? Profit, can you make money doing it? Can it yield a great profit margin for you? Third thing, potential. In the future, do you think that the service is still going to be something that people are going to need? So is there potential for that in the market in the long term? And then lastly, the most important one, which is psyche, which I think everyone completely forgets about. But if you are not doing work that's fulfilling you, if you're doing work that's draining you or that's making you roll your eyes or get really frustrated, it's not going to last. And so just to round up this mistake, being a jack of all trades, the way that you can solve for that is just to start looking at the 4 Ps, looking at trimming the fat and being really focused, because that is how you're going to essentially avoid excessive overwork, low profit margin work, and work that's just going to drain you. So that's probably my first example there, Sam. I know you've got one coaching example that you wanted to touch on, and then I think we can switch over to the second mistake.
Yeah. So what we've seen, we used to work with a lot of coaches. We still work with some, but there was a point where we actually had, I think, about 6 or 7 coaches, and they were all, executive coaches, leadership coaches, business coaches of some form. And one of the things that we saw with them was that, they didn't really know what they wanted to be known for. And so we had to do a lot of exercises with them to really kind of hone them in so that they could differentiate themselves in the market. And so we worked with them to understand, what is your actual, what is your passion? When people come to you, what do you find that, you are helping them with the most? What are the things that light you up the most? And that really helped us be able to define for that person what it was they should be doing, what they should be leaning into. Yes, you can coach people on every, version of, of themselves and all the different problems that they have, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so being able to strip back the things that you are able to do and just focus on the one thing makes you much easier for people to find, because then they know, okay, Tom, he is known for this. He works with, coaching only hospitality professionals. I am going to work with him versus this business coach who works with people from, every, a discipline across the board. So being hyper focused, as scary as it can be, especially in the beginning, if you're feeling like I really need to earn some money, I have to, earn being able to go out on my own, I have to replace the salary maybe that I've given up. It feels like you have to coach everybody for everything, but actually really being super specific about that is very important. So yeah, it's definitely something we saw, and actually leads into the next thing that I wanted to chat about is weak differentiation, and not differentiating yourself enough from other people in your industry. One of the things we see people doing is mistaking credentials for positioning. And they will very much highlight, I have 25 years of corporate experience. I worked in a blue chip company. And whilst that's great, at a certain stage in your career, that is given. That is basically everybody. And so, beyond just the tenure that you put in at a company, what have you learned and what has that skill allowed you to bring to the table for your clients? And that's what you need to talk more about. It's not about the number of hours, or years that you put in, to something. It's actually about, what you're taking from it and how it's going to change the way you show up for your clients. How do you work differently? What is your philosophy? And so that piece is so important. And I think a lot of people mistake credentials for their positioning. So yeah, definitely focus more on what it is you bring to the table and less about like how long you spent in a company.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something that I see happen all the time, just on that topic of mistaking credentials for differentiation. I see it very often when people say a former executive at X, Y, and Z company, or as a former MD at X, Y, and Z company. And this is often something that also happens when people are going independent and they're sort of dealing with the heartbreak of losing a very senior job title, is that they try to hold on to these things and they try to almost define themselves by this job title. And that ultimately also just results in weak differentiation, is when you're just piggybacking off of these things, but people don't have context to what that impact is that you've created and how that also applies to their organization, or how you could potentially solve their specific problem. Because it's great that you might have a lot of experience, blue chip company, you were a director of this or you were the CEO of that, but I don't have the context to how that can benefit me. And that's, I guess, just to add to that point, Samantha.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely an interesting point, and certainly one that we see a lot. The third one that I actually wanted to chat about as well is when it comes to content. So something that we have at Talent and Truth is a framework that we work with called the Triangle of Influence. And what this does is looks at content through the lens of likability, trust, and credibility. And so essentially, these are the things or the qualities that you want people to leave, feeling through the content that they read. And now every single piece of content you publish doesn't need to tap into each of these things, but ultimately what you're trying to achieve is one of those things through the content that you're putting out. So one of the things that we see executives doing is over-indexing on one of those things. And by that, I mean, it can be very easy to publish content that gets a lot of likes. You can create, a community of people because you post really funny memes all the time, or you tell personal stories that, really connect with people. And so you might have that likability factor and people might really relate to you, which is great. And so you'll see your vanity metrics grow, and that can feel really good for the ego. But ultimately, if you are not giving as much time and attention to content that is going to build trust and give you credibility, that stuff becomes less important. And the same is true if you over-index for credibility, or if you over-index for trust and you're only publishing content that is maybe very heavy, or it's research focused, or it's case studies. If that's the only thing that you're focusing on and you're missing that likability piece, then it becomes, again, a little bit of a flat line. And so I think the overall, objective that you should be kind of working towards is creating content that is going to make you likable, trustworthy, and credible in equal measure. So if you think 33% for each one, it's going to be very balanced. And so there is definitely a fear, I think, as well amongst executives where they feel like they're maybe being too personal. And so they feel safer just sharing things that are going to give them trust and give them credibility, but they forget that actually you need to be really likable and really human. And so that's probably the biggest coaching that we do in the work that we do with our clients is, making them feel safe to share things that, reveal a little bit more about what they get up to in their spare time, or about their families, or about hobbies they have, movies they watch, books that they've read or they've been inspired by. So all of this stuff is so important for actually, connecting with people and building a really strong positioning for yourself. So definitely try to get a little bit more of an equal balance amongst those things.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. And that's why the triangle of influence is so powerful. Just to give just a little bit of context to that, the rationale behind that is for someone, ultimately, if we assume that the end goal is to work together with someone, or let's say you're looking for clients, the first thing is they have to like you. And so once they like you, and that's why likability or content that creates that likability is so important. After they like you, only then will they start to trust you. Once they trust you and they start to consume more of your content, and let's say it is more of that credibility or that authoritative content that creates that respect, industry thought leadership, that is when people start to respect you. If you think about when you were in primary school and let's say your favorite teacher was teaching you something, you were so engaged. You looked forward to going to that class. But if you had a teacher that you didn't like, or you just you didn't trust them, you didn't resonate with them, so there was something off about them, no matter what they taught you, you probably zoned out. And so that is the psychology behind this approach. And just to make sure that when you are positioning yourself, you're introducing yourself, you're building out your LinkedIn profile, whatever it is that you're doing, is recognizing that you need a balance of all three to really create an impact.
Yeah. No, it's a great way to illustrate it. I think, remembering that likability piece, like just in terms of like how you learn from others. And when you think about the people who you want to consume your content, it's like, well, they actually have to like you. And if you haven't inspired people to like you enough to read your stuff, then that's the first hurdle you're going to have to get over before people continue on. So thanks for highlighting that. Let's move on to number 4. This is another one that you see a lot of.
Yeah, this is, again, one of my favorites, and something that takes a lot of reflection, but it's essentially when someone has, and I'll use a little bit of marketing mumbo jumbo, but we call it reasons to believe. And so when there are no reasons to believe that you are competent to deliver the particular impact or whatever the job it is that somebody needs you to deliver. And so again, similar to differentiation, this is one of the biggest mistakes that we see people making, because you can have 20 years of experience doing X, Y, and Z, but if there is no reason for me to believe that you are capable of delivering an impact or the impact that I'm looking for, then I'm pretty much going to zone out, and I'm going to look for someone who can give me reasons to believe. So examples of what reasons to believe are, or strong reasons to believe are, can you talk about past receipts, past proof that you have delivered this type of work before? Can you share the impact of that work? So let's say if it's revenue increase or whatever the impact is of that, so that when your client is reading your content or looking through your profile or on your website, they can see, right, I can immediately recognize myself in these examples because this person has done this particular thing and solved this particular problem. So ultimately, what you're looking for when you're trying to solve for reasons to believe is you're looking for tangible examples and tangible reasons why the person on the other end has to or should believe that you are capable of delivering the result, the particular impact. Another example of a reason to believe could be, maybe you have a signature framework. Maybe you have a signature way of working. Maybe you have a promise that you can deliver within a particular amount of time, 30 days, 60 days. Maybe you have a particular approach that you like to take. And again, looking at the mistakes that I see executives make, and in this particular case, I'm going to focus on execs that are going independent, is that, again, because they've positioned themselves too broadly as generalists, and because they have no differentiation, they end up taking on a lot of different things. As a result, they have no reasons to believe because they've not narrowed down on a particular thing, and they've not intentionally thought about, right, how am I doing this? How am I doing it differently? And so you're giving the customer a lot of problems to solve for. The customer has to decide whether you are the right fit because you've not positioned yourself. So they have to sift through all of this stuff and be like, right, is this the right person? So again, there's no reason to believe that you are. Are they different enough? Are they the right person to do this job? Do they have the evidence? Is there proof that they have solved this type of problem before? They might be impressive, but if there's no evidence that you've solved this type of problem, or if there's no intentional approach to it or intentional way that you're going to be working with a customer, again, that is when people start to put their defenses up, and that's when they start to have second doubts. And that is the last thing that you want. And so thinking about reasons to believe, the tangible outcomes of the work that you create, the ways that you approach work is going to help you position yourself better to everybody else. Even if you look at things like renewal rates, how many clients have renewed with you, or what is the impact that you've created? What are all the stats that you've created for other people? If you are still in corporate, I highly recommend that you literally just have a rolling sheet of just like results. What was the context and what was the outcome of that? What was the approach that you took? Because hidden underneath all of that is IP, it's thinking, and it is reasons to believe. And so that brings me then to obviously the close of the fourth point. Sam, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Otherwise, I will close on the final one.
Yeah, the only thing I would add here is just that, like, from a tactical standpoint, your LinkedIn experience section is really where you're going to want to put a lot of this stuff. So if you are, going through your sections and you got, I don't know, you worked at McKinsey for 20 years, put case studies in there, put, like list it out almost like a CV. This is where you want to have all of your numbers, all of the evidence, all of the data. Like, this is a really important spot. And this is where, people are going to go to see that you actually have experience doing the things that you've done. So rather than kind of filling your about section and your headline with all of this stuff, put that all in the experience section. So that's just more of like a tactical way to kind of, house some of this information in a way that is going to work for LinkedIn as a platform and for customers who are coming to your profile.
Yeah. And just to add like a final piece to that, don't make the mistake of giving people too much information. Again, positioning is the act of strategic conviction, trimming the fat, making sure this is what I want to be known for, and I want to make sure the market understands that. And so do not data dump a bunch of all the impact, all the results you've ever created. Make sure it is within alignment of, who you want to be known for, the problems that you want to be solving, and that you've got the proof or the reasons to believe that you can solve them. So again, that strategic conviction is really important when doing that. Fantastic. I'm going to touch on the final mistake that we see, and this is a psychological one. And again, this is very, very common. Probably, I would say 99.9% of the execs that I speak to go through this, and that is being too shy. I think pretty much every single client that we've worked with has had some element of fear, some element of, being fearful of being seen. What are my colleagues going to think? What is my family or my friends going to think? I don't want to seem like I'm being a LinkedIn influencer, or like I'm trying too hard, or like I'm desperate. And so what that ultimately means is, because they don't want to be seen as this, they end up doing nothing. And they end up taking no action. And that is, again, something that doesn't serve them in the long run. Because if you're quiet, if you're not talking about the things that you've done or showcasing them, if you're not making it easy for your customers to find you or potential employers to find you, you're just you are losing, nobody else is. And so this element of being too shy, being to and almost dressing it up as humility, because I'm humble, so I'm just going to keep quiet and, not going to put the spotlight on myself. That's going to cost you in the long run, because when you are, 20, 30, 40 years into your career, and let's say you're looking to go independent, you can't keep being shy, and you can't keep being fearful of being out there and of having to talk about the impact that you create. And so that is the final mistake that we see, or final top mistake that we see, and where we see people really, really holding themselves back. And I would almost say sabotaging themselves.
Yeah. It's definitely a big one. And it's actually probably the saddest one, I think, because there's so much, I think, learned behavior in it, and also just a fear of other people's opinions. And without centering yourself and understanding that, like, for you to be successful and for you to, move ahead in whatever endeavor it is you're wanting to, you actually have to put yourself out there, and you have to just remove like the opinions of other people. So yeah, it sabotages you. It really does. And so it's definitely one of the things, like I said earlier, when it comes even to creating content that makes you likable, it's just creating content full stop actually is, it can be very limiting for some people because they just don't want to do it. So I mean, even this live today, it's, do we love doing it? It becomes easier when you do it more often. But, a few years ago, like, this isn't the type of thing that, even we would have wanted to do. Sabine is starting a podcast because we understand for, our business to be seen, we still have to take steps that might feel uncomfortable, that might feel a little bit icky, but if we stayed in our heads too much and thought only about, what other people are thinking, then we would never, I don't know, make the moves that need to be made for our business. So I there's a big thing in that with the psychology for sure.
Yeah, the way that I see it is that the modern executive, or the executive of today, has to play two teams. And so, yes, play your company, be part of the company, do all of these things, be a great employee, build up your track record, amazing. But you also have to play a second team, and that is your own company. That is your own personal brand. That is your own personal enterprise. That is making sure that you always have your own back. The world of work is changing, and we're seeing mass layoffs across all different hierarchies. This is not just something that affects people that are more junior. We're seeing it at the highest levels. We're seeing early retirements. We're seeing retirement ages in some consultancies is as from 55, that things start getting a little bit uncomfortable. And so it is the responsible thing for you to be betting on yourself, and to also build up that second company, that second team that you should be playing for. It's the responsible thing to do. You wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket if you were investing. So why are you doing that with your career? And so for me, like, the key thing that I want to leave you with is that if you are an executive, or if you are thinking about going independent, building optionality, whatever it is, recognize the fact that you can't just keep playing for one team anymore, and you have to start building up that leverage on the side. Whether you go independent today, tomorrow, in 5 years' time, whatever it is, it's always going to benefit you, and it's always going to pay off. And this nonsense of being too shy is literally not going to help you get anywhere in life.
Great advice, really good advice. So you heard it from Sabina. Start putting yourself out there a little bit more. Before we wrap up, I just want to check if we had any questions that need to be addressed in the chat.
No, I think we're good, but thank you everyone for the support, and also for the great comments. And of course, whatever else comes through in the comments section, we'll answer over the coming days and weeks. So thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys, everyone, for joining. And as we said, there is a webinar happening in a couple of weeks. So if it's of interest, follow the link in the comments, and myself and Sabina will be there taking you through that. So would love to see as many of you there as possible. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will speak to you soon.
Awesome. Bye. Thanks, Sam. Bye.